Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Belkasoft Remote Acquisition, Belkasoft Incident Investigations, and Belkasoft Triage demonstration. My name is Jared Luebbert. I am a forensic sales engineer for Belkasoft. Also own my own digital forensic company located down here in Maryland, Gateway Forensics. So the plan of attack for today is to run through a few PowerPoint slides to basically give you an understanding of what Belkasoft Remote Acquisition is, how it works, and how it may help you or your organization perform digital forensic acquisitions remotely. So this portion will probably take 5 to 10 minutes. I'll then dive into a product demonstration on Belkasoft Remote Acquisition. When that is complete, I will then jump into Belkasoft Incident Investigations, just straight to a product demo, and then shortly after that, I will demonstrate Belkasoft Triage. So that will be the agenda for today, and without further ado, I will begin. So what is Belkasoft Remote Acquisition? Well, Belkasoft Remote Acquisition is a digital forensic and instant response software that acquires artifacts and images from remote endpoints. We have the ability to acquire the following items. It could be a remote hard drive or removable hard drive, selected artifacts if you don't want to acquire the entire hard drive, connected mobile devices, Apples and Androids. Now, this is going to be in Windows machines only, but I will show you that a little bit later on. We also have the ability to acquire RAM. So that's the incorporation of Belkasoft's free RAM capture tool. That's live RAM capture. It's available at belkasoft.com/get. So supported operating systems when it comes to remote acquisition will be Windows and Mac OS platforms. So now what I'm going to do is talk about the agent deployment methods. How we can manage to send this agent remotely to said endpoints in a remote location. Well, it's going to be different based on the platform. When it comes to agent deployment for Windows machines, we have three different options. We have a group policy object deployment, and this requires you to be an administrator on a Windows domain. So this is really good for the mass deployment option. So say you're working instant response case, or and you need to push agents out to thousands of endpoints at one time. This is going to be your go-to deployment method. You can simply craft a group policy object within the Belkasoft R product, and it'll push the agent out to all of the endpoints. Obviously, where a GP update will have to be ensued on the endpoints in order for this to take place. Also recommend tailoring this GPO to run its startup for this particular service. So that will allow the agent on the endpoint to automatically start and connect to your remote acquisition server anytime that the machine boots up. The second option is Windows Management Instrumentation. So this will require an administrator username and password for the endpoint to which you are trying to deploy the agent. The final Windows deployment option is local, and that could be via a USB thumb drive, whether you've configured it to a specific endpoint. You walk to the endpoint, you plug the thumb drive in, and walk back to your remote acquisition server. You can acquire it in that manner as well. But you can also acquire it via an SD card in the same manner, or SSH, PuTTY, network share, any way that you can transfer this agent locally from your box, you can do with this option. Now, there are three options, and there are three different manners in which you can employ these options. So I will get into that within the actual product itself, but the deployment you choose is kind of based on where you sit behind a router. So if it sounds confusing now, don't worry about it. I will show you what that looks like inside the product. Next is the agent deployment for Mac. Now, seeing as how Mac does not have GPOs or Windows Management Instrumentation options, the only option that we have available for this would be that local USB thumb drive or that network share SSH. However you can connect and push that agent to a machine in your network, can kind of be done with this local option. Okay, so Windows acquisition options. So there are going to be quite a few when it comes to Windows devices, and I'll go ahead and dive in here. So for disk drives, if you want to acquire a full system image, you can do either a physical or a logical acquisition of these drives. This will include your forensic hash verification, and as well as allow you to schedule when you want to acquire it, how you want to store the image, whether on the endpoint, a network share, or send it directly back to the remote acquisition. And you can actually choose when to send it back if you choose to compress it and save it on the endpoint until then. When it comes to artifacts, we would select a logical drive. You browse onto that logical drive, and then you have the option to pick specific artifacts based on categories such as audio, browsers, chats, cloud services, etc. You can pick these types of files or these types of artifacts. So you're basically doing a triage remotely and only grabbing what's absolutely necessary. Next is mobile devices. We do support Android and iOS devices. Now, there are 3 options that are available when it comes to acquisition of mobile devices remotely. Again, these mobile devices have to be connected to a Windows machine with the agent on it. Now, it's not magic. You'd still have to set the phone up the same way you would set it up locally. So if I want to acquire an Android, my first bet is to unlock the phone, go into settings, enable developer options, enable USB debugging, and enable stay awake. So this all still has to be done on that remote phone in order for it to be acquired. And same goes for iOS, the standard setup for iOS devices. Again, it's not magic, but it does allow you to be in multiple places at one time. If you have somebody else that can set the phone up, you can acquire it. So the 3 different options that are available for Android are the ADB backup, the MTP PTP, your media transfer protocol, picture transfer protocol. That'll be your pictures, videos, audio files, maybe a few applications. And then the final is a full file system copy if you found yourself a rooted device. Now, it's important to note that Belkasoft does not root devices, nor do they jailbreak devices, but they do support the acquisition of such. Moving into iOS devices, we have the 3 options, basically the same as Android, but in a iOS fashion. So we have an iTunes backup, we have AFC, Apple File Conduit, which is going to be just like MTP and PTP, your pictures, videos, audio files, maybe a few applications, and then a jailbroken full file system copy. Now, again, we do not jailbreak them, but we do have the option to acquire them. The final option when it comes to a Windows acquisition type is RAM. You have the option to acquire memory from any endpoint that you deploy an agent to in the click of a button, which can be very handy. Okay, and the macOS acquisition options that are available here are the disk drive. So we can acquire connected physical drives, not the internal Macintosh hard drive. At this specific point in time, I'm not sure of really many forensic software products that can do this. Now, with that being said, if you have a drive connected to the Mac, we can get a full file system copy of that, a bit-for-bit full system image of that drive. Now, we can, on the flip side of that, to kind of get around it, I know we're not going to get everything, but we can acquire files and folders. So we can do all files and folders, and by specifying the remote folder path that we want to acquire in the Macintosh hard drive to be root. So if we acquire the root folder, we are getting everything on the Mac. Obviously, we're not getting all system files, but we'll get any file that is stored on the Mac itself. Okay, and I had already spoke about these a little bit, but this is a nice little slide for you to look at, just to kind of reiterate on the what type of acquisitions are available when it comes to acquiring mobile devices remotely. Okay, and this is that contact slide that I was telling you about. I can bring this up towards the end of the demonstration. I said 5 to 10 minutes, and I think I hit 10 minutes on the dot. So now what I want to do is actually dive into Belkasoft remote acquisition and allow you to see, firsthand what the product's actually like. And I'm excited for you all to get your hands on this software and try it out yourself. So now we're back in with remote acquisition. This is what the remote acquisition server looks like upon first launch. Now, you won't have the endpoints that I have here, the 3 that I have, but you will have everything but these 3. You'll notice up at the top left-hand corner, I have the number of endpoints that I have. You'll notice some cool colors. These colors mean things, and I'll get into what they mean. It's not complicated, so don't worry. This is meant to be super simple and super easy for the examiner. So the first thing I want to do is dive into how to set up your remote acquisition server. And the first thing we're going to click on, you probably guessed it, is server settings. So if I select server settings, this is going to be where you configure the IP address of your forensic workstation. Now, for me, my server local IP address is this. I've just set up some random port, and I change this often, just so I'm not leaving the same port open all the time. Now, you'll notice that I don't have an external IP address listed. Well, that's because during this demonstration, I am sending my agents to endpoints that are on the same network as my forensic workstation is on. Now, because of that, I do not need an external IP address. But if I had plans of deploying an agent outside of my network through a router, I would need my forensic workstation's external IP address in this position. You do have the option to use SSL certificates for Windows devices, so that can be set up here. If you're confused, don't worry. We have this neat little button that says, I need more info. This brings up a 47-page help guide that is hypertext, so if you're like, okay, how do I do my server settings? I click server settings and walk through how to complete it. Again, not complicated, but if you are struggling, that's there. You don't have to be a network guru to make this happen. So that is it when it comes to setting your local IP address or external IP address for your remote server. That's it. There's nothing more to it. Okay, now that I've set my IP address for my remote acquisition server, now I want to deploy agents. So I go down here and I select deploy. So here are my options, Windows and Mac OS. And so I'm going to take a little second to talk about this little string text up here that says your license allows for 7 more endpoints. You'll notice that I have 3 endpoints here and 7 endpoints here. The default number of endpoints that comes with a basic purchase of Belkasoft Remote Acquisition is 10 endpoints. Now, it is important to note that when you deploy an endpoint, deploy an agent to an endpoint, and it connects to the remote acquisition server, that agent is burnt. What does that mean? It means that you can't remove that endpoint and automatically gain another endpoint back in the product. But on the flip side, that agent can stay on that endpoint forever if you wanted it to, and you could collect, anything you wanted from that machine at any time, assuming that you left the agent on that endpoint. The second you delete that agent from that endpoint, it's gone. There's no getting it back. Now, we do have bulk tier pricings when it comes to agent purchases, and that's something that James can touch on at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to get into the down and dirty of the deployment options of Windows and Mac OS. Now, I know we already talked about it, but I want to show you what it looks like inside the product. So first, I want to click Windows. You'll see we have 3 options. My endpoints are in the same address range as my remote acquisition, the same network. This is where I'm currently at and why I did not have an external IP address in my server settings. Next, my endpoints are on the outside of my remote acquisition address range. So you can see here by this picture that my endpoints are right on the outside of a router, and this is my remote acquisition server. So this is my network, this is my router, the endpoints are just on the other side of it. So you would select this option. Finally, the last option is both endpoints and the remote acquisition server are behind routers. This could be, you're sitting here and anywhere in the world you want to acquire these endpoints, this would be the option you would select. Again, if you're lost, you're confused, we do have that help guide, so please lean on that if you need it. Now, again, it's not meant to be complicated, it's meant to be super simple. Now, what option you choose here is going to dictate what is going to be available to you. So let me go up here and select my endpoints are in the same address range as my remote acquisition. If I select next, I'll have 3 deployment options. We talked about these 3 deployment options for Windows devices. We have local with that USB, SSH, file share, SSD, you name it, or SD. And then the next one is the group policy object for mass deployment, and then the Windows management instrumentation. Now, these are the 3 options for a same network deployment option. Select back and say my endpoints are on the outside of my router. If I select next, we lose our group policy deployment option. Well, we're not in the same network. We're not going to push GPOs to some random network outside of our router, right? So that's why it's gone. Now, we do still have the Windows management instrumentation and the local deployment. Clicking back to this one, finally, same options. We have Windows Management Instrumentation. That's just going to require that username, administrator username and password. This is going to be like the IP address that you want to acquire. Okay, so go back. So we've just covered all the different deployment options for Windows. Now we're going to jump into Mac. And as I stated, there's no GPO, there's no Windows Management Instrumentation, so we're only going to have that local deployment. So either one of these that you select are going to give you this option, a local deployment, a USB you need to ship, maybe you need to walk it somewhere, you name it. But this is how this is done. So say we've done push the agent now, we've configured our server, we've deployed our agents, and now they show up on my basically main page of remote acquisition. So let's look at these 3 hosts here. So I've deployed 3 agents. You'll see here that I have an accounting, a MacBook Pro. I've got another Mac OS platform, and you can see these platforms, what their actual platforms are over here under OS platform. And that I have a Windows machine. Now, you're probably wondering what these colors are. Well, orange means that there's an agent on this machine, but it's not currently connected to the remote acquisition server. And green, you guessed it, it's connected to the remote acquisition server. If I select this MacBook Pro and try to acquire it, nothing will happen. Now what I can do is edit this. If I select the edit button, you'll notice I've highlighted the endpoint, I selected edit, and now I can come in and change all of this information. I can assign it a color for quick sorting. I can give it a description so I know what machine it is. You'll notice that if I had ever acquired anything from that machine, its date timestamp will be listed. It would tell me what the status of that acquisition was, the path, the platform, the last time that endpoint connected, who it's assigned to based on what I set it to, and so on. Now, before I dive any further, I just wanted you to see that there are little funnels next to all of these. Well, that's for sorting. So say I sent out thousands of agents and I assigned all agents on HR platforms the color blue. I would go and filter by colors, and select the color, and say only show me blue. Select apply. Now I'm only looking at the endpoints that have an agent on, say, an HR workstation. If I want to reset this, I just click it, select reset to default, and all my endpoints are back. Another way that we can look at this is instead of the grid view that we're currently in, we can come up here and select the list view. selecting list view kind of gives you a baseball card view approach to your endpoints. So it's all up to you, however you want to look at it. This is really just here for user preference. I like to keep it in grid because it's compact, and I like simple, so that's where I'm going to keep mine for now. All right, so moving on. One thing I also want to mention is looking at all of the information that's available here. If I were to select this endpoint and select edit, you'll notice I can't change the client IP name. I can't change the client port. I can't change the path, the platform, the domain. So only things that you can change are going to pop up and allow you to change them. Okay, so this task button, this basically is like a log for anything you've ever done with your remote acquisition. You can say, okay, look, you created a disk image. You created an ADV backup for a remote Samsung Android. It was successful. You did it at this date and time, and it took this long. So very, very cool. There is a server log button that does give you a full log of the server deployment, acquisition, and so on. All right, moving back to endpoints. Now what I want to walk through is the acquisition methods. So I select the one that's green because that's the one that's connected to my remote acquisition server. I select acquire because it's now blue. Select acquire, and these are the 4 acquisition options that I was telling you about. Again, if I were to select, say, a Mac and it was online and select acquire, I would get something like disk drive, and it would try to find connected drives, or I would get something called files and folders. Those are the 2 options for Mac acquisitions. All right, selecting a drive. What it's doing now is it is querying that remote computer. It's identifying what drives are available. Hovering over the drives gives you information about the drive. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get a serial number drive model in here. You'll notice this is a physical drive and a logical drive. So if I wanted to do a, let's just say, full system image of that drive, now it wants me to choose whether I want to transfer that image directly back to my remote acquisition server, or if I want to store the image on the endpoint before the upload. Now this does allow for compression to save space, so just for the sake of this demonstration, I will go ahead and do that. If I select next, you'll see that I have 2 different image formats that I can acquire this image with. I can do either a DD raw image, or I can do an E01. We have the checksum, SHA-1, 256, MD5, selecting one of these or 2 of these, and verifying output, always a great idea. If you're planning on transferring this around, you can create a multi-part image. You can chunk it up into sizes of your choosing. So let's just say you want to do, let's just say 10 meg chunks. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but it's an option. So you can, make it however big or however small you want, and create that multi-part image so it'll transfer a little bit easier. Select next, and it says, okay, thank you for those settings. Now, when the acquisition should start, do you want to do it now? Do you want to start it maybe this evening whenever your employees go home for work? When do you want to upload it to the server? Do you want to upload it when it's complete? How about overnight, so the bandwidth is not taken up in the middle of the day? And how about delete the local image? Okay, well that's good. We don't want to leave an image on that local endpoint, so you can check this box and choose to delete the local image upon the completion of sending it back to your remote server. I select next. We'll get a verification screen saying, okay, this is the IP address. It's scheduled to start at 1920. This is the endpoint image path. This is where it is acquiring from. This is the server image path, and this is what the image name is going to be. You can see that these are variable based, but you can certainly change this to whatever you want it to be. So this is kind of your, hey, check your settings. This is what you chose to do. You wanted a raw image format. You wanted it multi-part. You had SHA-1, MD5, and you wanted to verify output. And then you would select start. Now I'm not going to do this, but that was basically a walkthrough of how that's done. So let's go back to acquire. let's go to artifacts, and you can see that we have the logical drives for us to choose from. Now, we can always refresh this to try to get new drives if someone plugs one in while we're attempting to acquire. But from here, okay, let's just go into C drive, and then we'll go through the whole order again. Do you want to transfer it back, or do you want to store an image and then load it later? For this one, let's just transfer an image directly. So I select next. Let's do SHA-1 and verify output. And now we get to pick what artifacts we actually want to acquire. Now I can choose all, or I can click audio, select specific audio files. I can choose chats and select specific chats. I can go mail and go by different operating platforms. So I can do all mail. I can do Outlook. I mean, you name it. You basically can do really whatever you want. Just grab what you want, select next. And again, when do you want to start it? Do you want to do it now? Do you want to do it later? Select next, look at your options, and click and select start. Super simple. It's not meant to be complicated. All right, mobile. I'm not going to dive into this too much because I already talked about it. Here's your 3 options. Apple, 3 options. Again, they have to be connected to a Windows device, and they have to be unlocked and set up appropriately in order to acquire them. Okay, and RAM. Acquire the RAM of your local machine. Give me a SHA, checksum. Don't worry about verifying the output. Start it then, upload it now, delete the local image upon completion, and begin. Super simple. You can see it's saved in a proprietary image format of .mem, non-proprietary, and that's also something I want to touch on as well. So if you were to acquire a iPhone backup or something, you would get a tar file. If you wanted to acquire the Android backup with ADB, you'd get an AB file. So these aren't proprietary image files that can't be loaded into any tool. They're standard image formats, and they can be loaded into any tool of your choosing, but I would recommend Belkasoft X. Okay, let's move back. So those are your acquisition options. Again, that is the extent of Belkasoft Remote Acquisition. Again, super simple, and you know it's meant to be easy for you. Again, if you have any questions when it comes to remote acquisition, I am here. I am available for any of those questions, but that is what I have for remote acquisition. Okay, so now we are in the main screen of Belkasoft Incident Investigations, or Belkasoft In for short. Now, if you were able to catch last week's demo on Belkasoft X, you'll notice that the user interface is very similar to Belkasoft X. And it's meant to be that way for a reason. It's just meant to look almost identical to Belkasoft X, but only allow for an Instant Investigations portion. Now, Instant Investigations was created, so if users did not want to purchase the Belkasoft X Corporate Edition, the highest edition of Belkasoft X, they could simply purchase the Instant Investigations module that becomes available within X Forensics Corporate Edition. Now, the purpose of Instant Investigations module, or the Instant Investigations product, is basically to do what it says. It's to set the examiner on a path for success. So what this does is it'll pull out methods of persistence, proof of execution, recently downloaded files, peer-to-peer communications, you name it. It's basically meant to pull out that information to allow an examiner to basically get a head start into their investigation. Now, I may not be describing that the best way that I could, but when I jump into the product, I think it'll click for you. So you have 2 options launching Belkasoft Instant Investigations. You can either create a case with a very similar case structure as pretty much any other product, especially all Belkasoft products. or you can open a case. And open a case will launch a screen that'll show you all the different cases that you've ever loaded in on your particular forensic workstation. So those are your two options. I already have a case loaded, and so I'm not going to load one at this time. The settings tab is going to be very important for you here. Now, you'll see a generals tab, so this is where the application's stored, the temp folder. You'll also notice down here, just like Belkasoft X, Belkasoft N automatically detects how many CPU cores and memory that you have inside of your forensic workstation, which is really nice. So you can either speed up or slow down your indexing, depending on your computer's workload at the time. Now, it's currently set to 12 CPUs on my end. I typically don't like to max out the number of cores I'm using. So let's just say 10 CPU cores, and we do recommend at least 2 gigs of memory per core. So with 10, I want to go ahead and set the memory utilization for indexing to 20 gigs. So this would be my recommended settings for processing a case if you didn't have a whole lot going on in the back end. You can certainly choose, whatever you'd like. You can choose to always open the last case, or you can choose to check for updates automatically. Let's go ahead and do that. If not, you would just come down here in the bottom left-hand corner and click Check for Updates. It would let you know where you were sitting with the latest update. Okay, so I now have that set. Let's go to Appearance. So we have different languages. All of these different languages, just like Belkasoft X, you can select them and they will switch the entire user interface to that language. You can change the font size, so good eyes, bad eyes, you control this. If you don't like the date time formats, change it. Same for time. Default encoding, go ahead and change that if you need to. Going into bookmarks, as you'll remember in Belkasoft X, it's just the same. You can change the category numbers, but the colors and the hotkeys remain the same. Now, because there's only 10 categories, it doesn't mean that you're limited to 10 bookmarks. You can have 5,000 bookmarks under one category. It doesn't matter. The categories are just there for you and for sorting color purposes. That is it. So this is where you would come to change the name of your categories. Okay, going into virus total, this is how Belkasoft N is going to basically run whatever it is you find if you choose to do so. Run it against virus total to see if there's any sort of malware associated to that specific hash or that file name. So that is where you'll go. You'll come in here to settings, select virus total, follow these 3 simple steps, and put your API key in. You get something like a limited number of commits per month, but it's a pretty large commit number. I've never personally run out of commits through virus total. And I'll show you how you can use this when we get into the product. So super simple. It's ready to go. And that is it for settings. So I go ahead and click cancel because I'm not going to make any of those changes. The product reference guide. Again, this is a nice guide built into, I might have already have it open. I don't. So it'll pop up eventually. Sometimes my Adobe acts out on my demonstrations. But it's a nice help guide that can pop up. Basically, it's hyperlinked, so you select it just like in Belkasoft R. You select whatever it is that you want. It'll jump to that section, walk you through any steps that you may be struggling with. Checking for product updates. If I click license information, you can see my dongle ID, when my support expires, or if I got another license, I can browse to it. Okay, so now what I want to do is jump into the Task tab. So the Task tab is just going to show you the status of everything that's taking place from an image that I loaded in. So I loaded an image in. You can see that it analyzes a whole bunch of different events. So you're looking at system profiles, WMI events, the SAM Hive, System Hive, security, components, you name it, it's in here. It'll tell you the status of the analysis of that particular section of the machine. So this is just a nice place to come and watch all of the evidence finish indexing. Now, let's get out of here and actually dive into what Belkasoft Instant Investigations is. So here we are. I had mentioned that it pulls out methods of persistence, methods of execution, system event logs, recent files, downloaded files, all things that are very important whenever it comes to incident investigations. Now, this is just a regular image that I've loaded up from a prior training course. I don't have the rights to this image. So basically, it's just here for instructional purposes. But this is an E01 Windows file that had some sort of intrusion event taking place on it. So that's why it was kind of a good demonstration for the product. Now, let's just go to methods of persistence. You'll notice if I select persistence, nothing pops up. Well, that's because I actually have to select that particular type of artifact to look at it. So, app init DLLs, very, very common in this type of situation. So here we have a registry viewer. We can either view, this particular registry right here down in the bottom, or we can expand it to a full screen by selecting that little pop-up button. We can browse the registry files just as we would any other registry viewer. You look down here at the bottom, it keeps a nice path of where you're currently at so you don't get lost. That's one of my favorite things, because if you're anything like me, if you get lost in the registry, sometimes you can, it takes a while to find yourself again. Okay, so a change in default file associations. Okay, that makes sense. This is pretty common as well in instant investigations. Someone changes a file association, the change in the default file association. Scheduled tasks. Someone set something to run so you don't have to do it manually. So these types of things you come in, dig into. You can either look at them in the built-in hex viewers, either in the bottom of the screen, pop out to full screen. You got your properties tabs over here. You can search through the hex for specific text. You can choose to match case. You can filter by hex. And it's very, very nice feature. We also have the option of highlighting. So here I see something called triggers. Well, that's kind of exciting. Maybe. I don't know. I bookmark it. Now, but let's go to edit bookmarks. Come in here, go to description, edit the bookmark. For the description, I'm going to say trigger. Okay, that's exciting. Select OK. Now I know that is why I selected and bookmarked that particular type of the hex file. So see, it's a pretty big file. So if I go up to the top, now all of a sudden I want to get back to that the bookmark that I just did inside of the hex file. Well, select the pencil. There's your bookmark. Go to bookmark. And there I am, right back in the hex file. All right, diving through some of the other things. I mean, all this is here. If you do incident investigations, a lot of this will make a little bit more sense to you. While I have done some incident investigations, I typically, this is not really what I do every single day. So I can speak to it, but I'm sure that some of you are a lot smarter at this than I am. So startup services, startup folders, WMI, so your Windows management instrumentation, somebody controlling your computer, your security logs, system logs. These event logs are going to be crucial for your incident investigations. A lot of times, like your initial method of intrusion is going to be something like a downloaded document, or someone downloaded something, someone clicked something. So these LNK files, these are all very, very important to look at. But the whole point of this incident investigations is to pull out these artifacts that are commonly seen that could in an incident investigation. So we do that for you, so you're not digging through the entire image, looking for a needle in a haystack. So this isn't meant to solve the case for you. It's meant to pull out the most important features, artifacts of an image. That way you're not wasting time. But again, it doesn't do it for you. And that is pretty much it when it comes to instant investigations. Uh, so now I will go ahead and jump into triage. Okay, so this is Belkasoft Triage. So quick little tidbit on Belkasoft Triage. It is built to be portable. It comes on a USB dongle. It's got an expandable SD card slot on it, so you can make it kind of as big as much storage as you would like. The purpose of this is for it to run as an executable off of the USB drive on a machine, say in the field or somewhere you need to do something quickly, i.e. triage. So you plug in the dongle, it runs from the dongle, you're then able to acquire evidence with Belkasoft Triage and then store that evidence back onto the dongle. Now the plug and play with the triage, it will leave tiny footprints, but it would be just like inserting any other USB into a, say, Windows machine, for really any type of, anytime you did that. So knowing that it will leave a tiny footprint is just going to be part of your report, but it is meant to leave a tiny footprint. It's not going to make a bunch of noise. Now, once I launch Belkasoft Triage, you'll see here I have RAM acquisition, triage configuration, then searching whatever my configuration was, and then exporting my findings to load into your favorite forensic suite. Again, I'd recommend Belkasoft X. So what I did is I ran Belkasoft Triage as administrator on my machine. It just allows you to gather more data when it comes to a memory acquisition. Now, I understand sometimes you're not going to have that option, but if you do, I would recommend running Belkasoft Triage as an administrator. Okay, so here we are. It says, hey, the product will guide you through these following steps, and that's exactly what it does. If I select next in the bottom right-hand corner, it says, do you want to acquire the RAM? Well, sure. So I select yes. Where do you want to store the RAM image? Okay. And then select next, and then it's going to acquire RAM. I can stop the acquisition. Okay, and it says, what kind of source would you like to triage? Well, do I want to triage the entire disk, or is there a specific folder that is really interesting to me? I don't know. Let's go disk for this one. So let's go to the C drive. It's kind of the smallest of the drives that I have here. I select next, and you'll have just a couple options, right? If you're doing a triage, you typically have some hash sets that you want to filter against to see if there's any matches. Maybe you're looking for skin tone. So we can do either of these, or we can do none of them. It doesn't matter. You can get the same effects by choosing none of them, right? You won't have the matches for the detections, but you can still triage the machine without these selections. So I'm going to select next and say, okay, these were your options. You can see we're in the triage configuration portion of Belkasoft Triage. It says you wanted to do a disk. You selected the C drive. You did not choose any of these options, and we select start. So it's going to start scanning. It found in this computer, it found 3 drives. Well, we knew that. It told us that. But we know that we selected this one. So data sources, you can see we pulled out some Hyperfill files. We've got some DMG files. And this is just going to continue to build. Documents, different documents that I got here. System files, you can see some pictures, the names of the pictures, mail, mobile applications, chats, videos. So, and this will just continue to build, and you'll see this searching profiles until it's completed. So, depending on the size of the disk that you're triaging, it may take a little bit of time, but it's triage. It's meant to be fast. It's just getting the basic information from the machine that says, hey, look at all this stuff we found. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to export it all? Do you want to select certain items and export just those? So we can certainly do that. If we go to pictures, say we're looking, or let's just do a mobile application. Say we're looking for something kind of specific. Well, we can click through here. Okay, let me just stop this. So you get the point what it's doing. It's searching the profiles. It's pulling out the relevant information based on what you selected. I'm going to stop the search. It says, yeah, you sure? I said, yes. Okay, now let's go to mail. I can click and choose. I can click export. And then this is where I'm going to come and specify what I want to export based on file size, based on type. Emails might have been a bad example because of that, but now you can see like the actual file names. You can pick and choose which one to export. You can filter, so if there's something specific that you're looking for, let's just say bad. Now I can filter by bad, and then it's going to look, okay, I pulled Apache bad message from some autopsy picture that I have on this machine. And you notice that it didn't just filter pictures, it filtered the entire findings for what I was looking for. So that's just a really, really quick way. And again, if you had hashes, you would see something like a hash match over here as an artifact, and you can choose to export those specific hashes. And that is pretty much it. You export the specific artifacts that you choose, and then you load them into your favorite forensic viewer. So that's it. If there are any technical questions, please feel free to reach out. You can email me at jl@belkasoft.com. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Perfect. Thanks, Jared, for your time today. On behalf of everyone at Teel Tech Canada, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'd also like to mention that we're offering a 10% discount on any new Belkasoft software purchases until December 31st, 2021. If you'd like to learn more about Belkasoft's line of forensic tools, please feel free to contact our Canadian office at 250-893-6125 or email us at sales@teeltechcanada.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys again next time.